All set. My name is Marshall Worth. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is July the 27th of 2012. Glad to be here. Thank you. Appreciate that. It's good to be sober. Appreciate the introduction. It's interesting. I don't remember always having a smile on my face. That's interesting to hear what other people hear about you. What I remember is being terrified, of hating life. There was a long period there where I hated all of you. I hated that I was here, and I thought it was very unfair that I was an alcoholic. But that has since changed. I've been shown a different way to live, and ultimately, I think really what happened is fell into a good group of people, a good group of men and women that allowed me to have my own experience. And they showed me what it meant to live by principle. They showed me what it meant to be of service, and then they just let me go out and try my own thing and find God myself, and that's what worked for me. Those one thing I didn't say is those people belong to a group called There's a Solution. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. We're up in Cary now. We used to be in Holly Springs, but we're on the corner of Jones Franklin and Tryon in Cary at the Macedonia Methodist Church. Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Y'all got me out of a business meeting tonight, so I appreciate that. And if you're ever in the area on one of those nights, please come by. I know y'all have a lot of support when you come and speak at our events there, and we appreciate that. So we would just love to have you there and just love to, share life with you, try to carry the message, try to be of service for a little bit. Let's see. Typically, when somebody asks me to speak, it's still the case, even though it's been a number of years. I just get so nervous, and about 3 or 4 days, I start before the commitment. I start, reciting like what I'm going to say to everybody, and going over my story over and over again. And I'm reminded of something somebody told me once, just about speaking engagements in general, is that the moment you stop getting scared, the moment you stop feeling nervous about it, means that you don't care anymore. And I can certainly say that's the case. I mean, I'm not perfect. There's probably a lot of ego and self-centeredness that comes into me trying to rehearse for you. But I'm also reminded of just some experiences that I've had. One in particular that kind of has come up, and then I was thinking about yesterday, actually. I remember being with a guy. I picked a guy up from a homeless shelter in Raleigh, and we used to, we'd go get coffee with them, and there was a meeting at a place called Valley in Raleigh that we'd go to, and we'd get coffee beforehand. And so I picked this guy up, and I'm speaking to him, and I'm nervous as usual. I mean, the stuff running through my mind is I don't have anything to share with this guy. He's about as different as you could get for me on the outside, right? What it looks like. What am I going to do? What am I going to say? How am I going to help him? Just that litany of just garbage that's running through my head. And we start talking, and he starts talking about his crack habit. And I'm like, well, don't get me wrong. Crack is great. I'm fine with that, but I don't identify with that. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't really have that experience that you have. And so I started to talk about my drinking. And I remember in that moment when we connected and we both identified over alcoholism, and we both identified over drinking, because at once you could see his face. He kind of lit up. He started smiling, and I started feeling better and started to smile and all that kind of stuff. And I just remember that connection that I felt with this guy on the outset that I thought I had nothing to do with, that I thought there was no way that I could identify with this guy, but we had something so in common, that hopelessness and defeat of alcoholism. And we were able, after that, to just share life a little bit and just kind of talk and be together. To get to it, though, I did at one point drink. Before that, I was born. I came into a good family. Grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina. I would consider it, I hated that town when I was growing up. It was sleepy. There was nothing going on. But what I remember most about it is just how terrified I was. And I don't know where any of that stuff came from. My parents were great. My mom showed me all the love that she possibly could in her own way, in her own manner. My dad is the type of guy that just set an example of how, in my opinion, a man should be in his life. He got up early in the morning. He would read a piece of spiritual literature. He'd meditate and pray a little bit. He would just give himself and show you how much he loved you all the time. And he was just that that love and tolerance and respect that he showed to all at all times was just always constantly there. And I do have an older brother, and of course we kind of, we butted heads for a little while, but, there's nothing there that would suggest that or at least, think about, I'm trying to say is there's nothing there that would make me fearful of anything. I don't know where it came from. I just know that it's just like when I woke up, the moment that I started making memories, I just remember being afraid of life. And I was afraid of all of you. I was afraid of what you were doing. I was afraid of what you were saying. I was afraid, and I was pretty certain that you hated me, that you were judging me for what I was doing and what I wasn't doing, and I was just terrified. And I dealt with that fear in a couple of different ways growing up. But ultimately what happened is I had what I consider is a very close-knit group of friends. We're still very close today. But a very good group of friends that kind of pulled me out of some funk that I was in at one point, and they got me over to another buddy's house that he was having a house party. And I had, I think up to this point, I was starting to smoke a lot of pot. I was, I think I'd had half a beer before this, but really what I had come to the conclusion, up until this point, what I had come to the conclusion is why would you drink? Like, I cannot understand why anybody puts themselves through that. They're going to get hung over. They're going to do all this stupid stuff. Like, why would you ever do that? I had pretty much assumed too that, man, smoking dope, that was my thing. That's what I'm going to do because I can wake up and go to school and I can do it, all that kind of stuff. And there's a point for me kind of saying all of this, and I'll get to that just about other drugs in general. But ultimately what happened is these guys, they brought me out to that house party and convinced me to buy these 2 airplane bottles of Jack Daniels, and told me I should drink them as fast as I possibly could. And I believed them, and I did that. And the moment that I will never forget, because I had a spiritual experience. I had a psychic change in this moment. I had old ideas cast out, and they were replaced by new ideas in just a split second. And I remember what happened is I was coming in through this garage, covered garage, and I tripped on this door sill into this basement and landed flat on my face. And what would have happened had I not been drinking or had I not had that psychic change is I would have started crying. I had all these older guys looking at me, older brothers were there, and I knew that they were going to be judging me, and all my friends were probably laughing at me. But as I looked up and I picked my head up off that floor and they were looking at me, I knew exactly what they were thinking. And that was they wanted to be like me. They knew that I was the coolest guy in that room. Everybody was glad that I was there. They were waiting for me to bring the women over. They were waiting for me to tell them where to go. I just remember I had this feeling of power all of a sudden. And it was the greatest experience that I had ever had at that moment because, like I said, all of that fear had just cast out immediately. And it was replaced with strength and hope and a sense of purpose in the world. And what I figured from that point on is that, coming back to it, and I'll just say this with drugs, if alcohol can do that to me, then I'm going to do anything else I can, and I did that, and I just did whatever anybody had. It was easier to get those things growing up, but ultimately what happened is, if we talk about smoking dope, like I would ride in a car, and I got really paranoid one day, and I said, man, I don't like this anymore, and I'm going to stop, and I stopped smoking. Or doing something else like cocaine, again, it's fine, it's great, I enjoy the feeling, but it's like I don't like the jittery, I don't like this, and I'd stop and I wouldn't do it anymore. But time after time again, when every indication that was given to me that I should really stop drinking, that the people in my life would be better, that my family would be better, that I could be happier, that like all of this stuff, every indication that I had is that if you would just stop drinking, you'd turn out all right. I couldn't see that. I couldn't piece that together. And in fact, that never came to me really until the last day when I came to after that last drink, where not only did I realize that alcohol was the cause of all these problems, but also like I had nothing left in the world. Like all that sense of purpose that I had was gone. If alcohol couldn't solve those problems anymore, then I've got nothing left. And so that's the point of kind of saying that those kind of things. I could pick up stuff and put them down, but alcohol was always constant. Alcohol always solved those problems that I had. And growing up, I got into a little bit of trouble. Nothing real major. I bounced around school, kind of convincing my parents that I needed to, I had locational problems and I needed to be somewhere else. And they got me into a boarding school. That boarding school doesn't like when you drink or sell drugs to students, and so they told me I shouldn't come back. And just stuff like that would happen. Again, I think to me what that highlights is like if you look at it, every indication in my life, every indication around me would make you believe like, man, here's a guy that if he's going to be successful, like if anybody is going to be successful in life, it's got to be this guy. Like, look, he's got a great set of parents. He's got a good background. His parents pick him out of the trash heap of life and try to get him into good schools. But then you look at me and say, but here he is, drunk one more time. And that just happened over and over and over again. And my mentality at that point really is I just didn't care. I mean, by the end of kind of my teenage years, I was 18. I got into a lot of trouble right after I turned 18, and really what I wanted was for everybody to just leave me alone. Stop talking to me, just leave me alone. And my biggest aspiration in life at that point is that I'd take this phone that I had, my wallet, and I would just throw them aside and I would just walk down the road and you'd never see me again. And that was going to solve my problems, is that if you just left me alone, I'd be okay. But I also couldn't understand why am I always the one in front of a judge? Why do I always have to have a lawyer? Why am I in jail? Like, my friends are here doing the same thing. We're in the same parties. We're doing the same stuff, but it's me that's always getting caught. It's me always doing something wrong or whatever it was. And that was baffling to me. It didn't make any sense to me, because what I saw was that we were all the same. We were doing the same stuff. And it just didn't make any sense to me. Like, why is this stuff happening to me? One of them later on in life that occurred is I get really drunk, and then I would just be a complete jerk to people. And I would do something to ruin somebody's night, and whatever it was, and I'd come to the next day with guilt, shame, and remorse, and I just couldn't ever understand, man, why? I don't want to be that person. I don't like that I turn into this person when I drink like that, and I just, why can't I just be happy when I'm drunk? It was just baffling to me why I could never figure it out. I could never get the right combination of things, whatever it was. And perhaps, growing up, maybe the case there is again, my aspirations really were just to throw the keys down and walk off. My favorite thing to do was to be in trouble with my parents, because that meant that I could drink all night, because they would ground me, so I wouldn't go anywhere, but then I'd steal the liquor out of the liquor cabinet, and that was awesome to me, because I could get as drunk as I wanted, nobody was going to talk to me, and I could just sit and drink for as long as I wanted, because they went to bed at night early. So the end of this period, I ended up in jail, and I was just disgusted with my life. I kept on. God, man, I got kicked out of school, and then I got put in jail, and just every single time my dad would show up, and he picked me up from out of state school and drove me home. He came to the jail at 7 a.m. to bail me out and drive me 2 hours home. And so it's like every single time I saw this, and what I'm thinking to myself is like, God, I am a worthless human being. And I remember that drive home from jail and just crying the whole time and not being able to look at him just for how disgusted I was with my life, to think of how far I was from this example that these people set in my life, and that I would never be like that. But coming home from jail, I mean, that wasn't the end for me. I don't know what happened there. I mean, I was terrified. I was desperate. I don't think I was desperate enough. I was desperate to get out of trouble. I was looking at some felony charges, and I was desperately didn't want to go to. I guess it would have been prison at that point because I was 18. But I just desperately wouldn't want to do that. And so my parents, when they sat me down, they said, "All right, Marshall." By this point, they had dealt with lawyers. They had dealt with some kind of minor stuff that I'd gotten into. They dealt with me getting kicked out of school, and now I'm coming home from jail with these charges. And they sit me down and they say, "Look, this is it. We're not dealing with this anymore." They went through this kind of thing with my brother. He's not an alcoholic, but he had a tough teenage years. And they just said, "Look, we're done. We're tired of getting lawyers for both of you. We're tired of picking you up from wherever you are that you just got thrown out of. Like, we're not doing this anymore. So what we're going to do is you're either going to go to work for your dad, sweeping floors, and you figure out whatever's going on with your life by yourself, or," and they slid this little pamphlet across, they said, "where you can go to treatment." And like I said, I don't think I was desperate enough to stop drinking, but I certainly was desperate enough to get out of trouble. And I do remember, though, that delusional or that baffling feeling of thinking again, like, man, why am I in trouble? Like, I had all this stuff that I got busted with, but so did that guy, and he was sitting right beside me, and so did he, and all that kind of stuff. And I wrote some kind of, sob story of a letter to my mom saying stuff like that, like, I don't know what's going on, I don't know why I can't stop. I think I need to go to treatment. And so they shipped me off for a month, and it was a positive experience. I talk highly of my family. We certainly don't have, we have our problems, right? I mean, it was a positive experience overall. It helped us become closer. It helped us talk about some things we needed to talk about. For me, they introduced me to a 12-step program. They introduced me to Alcoholics Anonymous. And probably the best thing that happened is, day before I'm getting out and I'm going to be, shipped off, and I'm terrified, right? Like, it's safe and secure in this environment because you can't have books, TVs, magazines, you can't play games, like, you can't do anything, so I'm safe and secure. Like, I can't get drunk here. But then now they're going to tell me that, you're right, it's time for you to go, you got to leave. And I'm terrified because it's like, well, what do I do? Like, where do I go? What do you mean I got to get out of here? And so what they told me is they said, okay, when you get out of here, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and you're going to get a sponsor. No idea what any of that stuff was. I had no idea how that played any part in my life, but at least it was some kind of direction. It was more than I had. And so I started a period of about 3 years of sobriety. That was positive. I mean, I graduated from high school. That wasn't something I thought I was going to do. At this point, I was like, look, I don't need to, I'll get a GED, like I'll do that. I don't have to worry about going to college, and then I'll just figure something out. I did graduate from high school. I got into a college that I had always aspired to be in, a major that I'd always aspired to be in. And then more importantly, and I think this is kind of like the weird, if you want to talk about maybe realm of the spirit, if you'd like to say God doing for me what I can't do for me, whatever it is. But so I moved to Colorado for school, and I was in Boulder, and I got in touch with men out there that knew a guy named Don Pritz very well. And if anyone is familiar with Don P., he's a good name here because he used to be a friend of Tom I, as I understand, and Steve and everybody else. And they had something more than these guys that they do book studies at their houses, and I was going to these young people meetings, but they'd show up there, and I just remember, I struggled with sobriety at that point because I didn't think I was an alcoholic, but I just looking at these guys, I knew like something is going on here. There's something different about these guys than most of the other people that I'm surrounded by, and I couldn't like put my finger on it. And looking back on it, I mean, they had a sense of peace and serenity. One of the guys had some family issues going on with his life, but he was walking through that fear sober, and he was doing it with dignity and carrying principle into his life. And the only thing that I could really grab at that time is that, man, they're doing something different. Something's going on, and they've got something that I don't. Ultimately, what happened though is that feeling of doubt kind of crept in, and I always had this thought that, man, I'm not an alcoholic. I just don't understand what y'all are talking about when you talk about your drinking. I understand the God stuff, like I appreciate that, and seeking God, that's something I've always wanted to do, and so I appreciate what y'all have done for me, but I just don't understand what you mean to be hopeless. I don't understand what it means to be powerless. And despite many well-intentioned individuals explaining it to me, given their experience, strength, and hope, I just couldn't grasp it. And so when I turned 21, a little while after probably, on a trip back home for maybe spring break or something like that, I started drinking again. And this is another one of those experiences where I'll never forget this moment. Because again, I immediately had this psychic change, this spiritual experience when that alcohol entered my body. Immediately, all of that fear that had built up and all of that anxiety that had built up over the last 3 years just immediately washed away. And I remember that night I had 2 beers and just how elated I felt that I was drinking again. And I just remember being so excited because I knew that because I drank 2 beers, and in my opinion, so when I heard everybody else talk about alcoholism, like what I heard is like a Jekyll and Hyde. Like you would drink and then you'd Hulk out and then you just like bust walls down. I was like, well, that didn't really happen to me. Looking back on it, I mean, I can totally say like that. Exactly what happened to me, right? I mean, I was a guy that was fearful, selfish, self-centered, just had all this pent-up anxiety, didn't know what to do in the world, and you put 2 beers in me, and all of a sudden I'm on top of the world, right? Like all of a sudden my problems, you can't touch me, my problems are gone, nothing matters anymore, I know my place in life now, everything was solved once those 2 beers got into me. But because I didn't see that, I don't know, I always call it a physical change. Because I didn't see whatever it was I thought I should see, I was like also elated, like, yes, I'm not an alcoholic. I know this means I'm not an alcoholic. And I remember I spoke to my dad out on this little patio outside of their house, and I was telling him I was drinking again. And I remember what I said to him was, look, I'm drinking again. I don't think I'm an alcoholic. And what I'm going to do is some controlled drinking. And I said, it's really important that I follow this schedule. And I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 2 beers a day. And I said, it's really important that I have 2 beers a day. I said, it's more important that I have no more, and more importantly, I have no less than 2 beers. I was like, I have 2 beers a day. And I just remember him looking at me like, what are you talking about? Like, why are you telling me this? And I just remember he was just so baffled. Like it just, coming from a guy, not an alcoholic, just like, what are you struggling with here? Like, what are you trying to tell me? And from that point on, I mean, I can tell you from 21 to 26, I just stayed as drunk. I just feel like progressively I got more drunk. It's like each day was just drunker than the day before. I just progressively got drunker than I'd ever been in my entire life. And it started, the next day after that conversation with my dad where I went to this house party. that a friend was throwing, and got just absolutely hammered. I remember one night dancing to techno music with two ladies downstairs. Flash forward another part of that night, I got a bulletproof vest on and people are like hitting me. And then the next part of that night, I'm just vomiting in this dude's lawn that knows my brother. Wake up the next morning just embarrassed, like, good Lord, like what just happened? This is, man, who do I need to apologize to? But I knew, I was so certain though that I was like, you know what? It's okay. It's okay that all that stuff happened because I just needed to get it out of my system. Like I just, I hadn't drank for like 3 years or so. I just need to get all this stuff out of my system. Like I'm going to be okay, and here's how. And that's all it took to convince myself that everything was fine. From that point, I managed to get through college. Probably the only way I got through college is I was dating a girl that was in AA. Kind of stopped going when we were dating, but she remained sober. But her family loved to drink, and it was like controlled drinking on Thursday through Sunday. Like it just, because we lived far away. We would go to this like apartment complex where they all were, and somehow it just all kind of meshed together where I could graduate college and I could drink as hard as I could for those 4 days and then go back to class and stuff like that. And, but ultimately, though, it's not like I could hold it together that well because just, again, stuff would happen that I was just like mortified by. One night I got into a pretty serious argument with one of her brothers. Got into a physical altercation with my girlfriend. I don't know what happened. That obviously kind of ramped up the argument and the fight, and the next thing I know, he's got a knife out, and ultimately what happened is they pulled everybody away. But what I remember from that next is coming to in her parking lot to her apartment, and she's dragging me inside, and all of a sudden, like it dawns on me, like what I've done. And I tell you, like I loved this family. I loved all of them. They brought me in. I moved out to Colorado. They brought me into their home. They treated me like one of their own. They loved me. I loved their daughter. I loved the brothers and sisters that were there. Like I absolutely loved this family for what they provided me and for that warmth and care that they showed me. But then I just kind of came to, and I'm thinking about this scene in my, it's like playing over, like, man, like what did I do to my girlfriend? And what did I do to her brother? It's like, how could I possibly do this stuff? Like I never wanted any of this stuff to happen. Like I gotta hate it when I'm a jerk to people. Like why can't I just be nice and happy? And I was terrified of what happened. It's like I did not start that night thinking that I was going to get into a fight with somebody. I absolutely did not want to do that. And I was terrified. And it sobered me up for a little bit, 3 or 4 weeks. And I remember, it took a couple of weeks to go around and make amends and really apologize to the family, to her parents, to her. And I remember what, really happened. It was like, all right, we'd go out to dinner, this girlfriend and I would go out to dinner and she would say like, Marshall's not drinking right now. And I would be like, you're right, I'm not drinking right now. And I was just terrified. And about a week later, I'm thinking like, well, like I can have a beer. Like a beer is totally fine. Beer's not going to do anything for me. And we're eating dinner. Like I'll get a steak or something like that, and I don't have to worry about getting drunk or anything. And then a week later, it's like, well, I know what my level is. Like I like, we'll go to the bar, and I know that I like to have a couple of drinks, and I just feel it. I start feeling this, and I'm good. And then of course a week after that, it's just all bets are off. And I'm drunk as I'd ever been in my entire life, over and over and over again. And there was no sufficient power to bring about any of that shame, guilt, and remorse that had been there 4 weeks ago. I mean, that was completely gone. And it was just replaced with just a very simple thought of like, I'm over that. Like, I'm a different person now. Like, here's how I'm going to stop it. And really what it was is like, I know my limit. drinking carried on. Instances occurred like that over and over again. I can't count how many times I woke up with the four horsemen, over my head: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Where's my car? Why is my wife mad at me? Do they know that I stole that stuff from them? Like, all that kind of stuff. I never quite understood, I don't know, the depths of my drinking. It just never occurred to me that that was even a problem. And I never even thought about how much I drank. It just, I got to a point where I needed a beer in my hand to walk around the bar, and I needed a shot to get me going. And my reasoning there was because sometime before I decided that I was drinking too much beer. And what I needed to do was, instead of filling up a full glass of beer, just do 3/4 and then pour tequila in the rest of it. And the purpose of that is that I'm going to get drunk faster, and I won't drink so much because I'll be drunk quicker. And that was like a completely logical conclusion to me, is that I would stop drinking so much if only I just drank more tequila. It's honest, that's exactly what I thought, and that's how I would show up to bars, and it just never occurred to me how much I was drinking until little stuff would happen. I'd buy a bottle of Jaeger, and the next morning, it'd be gone, but it'd still be in my freezer, and I'm like, man, who's drinking this? Like, this is crazy. Or I'd get a bar receipt, show up in my pocket, and I'd show up to the bar the next night, and she was like, oh yeah, I didn't charge you for about half of those drinks. I was like, wow, that's a lot. Another instance where I had gallbladder issues for 5 or 6 years, never knew what they were, but I'd end up in the emergency room every now and then when they would start hurting. And the guys, the intake, they always ask me, all right, how much are you drinking? And so I'd always pause for a second, be like, all right, how much am I drinking? So it's like this amount on this night, and if you add all that up, if you sum it all together, it's probably this much. So if you average that, I'm really going through this, and I'm finally getting to the point where it's like, all right, I can't say that because he's going to tell me I'm drinking too much. And the guy's just staring at me, just all right, just tell me. And I finally say I don't know, 3 or 4 beers a night. And he looks at me and he goes, that's too much. And I was blown away. I reduced the amount. It's what would have happened if I told you how much I drank? I was absolutely blown away. But again, I never thought about it. I never consciously thought about how much I was drinking. Really because drinking was the reason why I had a job. Drinking was the reason why my wife loved me. Drinking was the reason why my parents could stand to be around me. Drinking was the reason why my friends could stand to be around me. Drinking was the only purpose that I had in life. And I would never think about that stuff. But ultimately what happened is I said a little bit earlier, is I was in Hawaii on a work trip, and I'm at the 30th floor of this hotel, and I'm coming to from just another night of this 5-week work trip. And I've done some horrible, disgusting things on that work trip, and I'm trying to laugh it off, and I'm trying to shake it off like I normally would. Here's how I'm going to beat it this time. I know my limit. I just need more tequila. I'll stop going to the bar at 4 a.m. all that kind of stuff. And for whatever that reason, that morning it was different. Again, I can't tell you how many times I woke up in that same situation, just terrified. But for whatever reason, when I came to that morning, it was different. And the way that I look at it now is I would say that I'd always been able to explain away that I wasn't a horrible and disgusting person. But I came to that morning and I knew without a shadow of a doubt that all of the horrible, disgusting things that I did made me a horrible, disgusting person, and I would always be a horrible, disgusting person. And I don't know where that came from. I didn't read any books that told me that. I didn't go to class. I had some very good therapists that were very beneficial for me over my life, but I never heard that from them. I just came to one day and it was different. And the only thing I can guess is that I drank myself there. I just drank myself to a point of desperation. And that feeling of hopelessness was just again, there's another moment that I hope I never forget. It's just how horribly hopeless I felt in that moment. That it's like I could see clearly in my mind the picture of my life. Like if you had a trajectory of my life, and I was like, man, I graduated college, and then I got married, and I got this house and car, and I could see that at that moment I was on the top of the peak of the mountain. And I knew that it was downhill in any direction I looked. And I could just tell that there was nothing left for me. There was nowhere else for me to go. There was nothing else that I could do. That life would be bitter and miserable for the rest of my days. And I was absolutely certain that was the case. But in that moment, I thought of that guy in Colorado. And I don't know why I hadn't spoken to this guy in 6 or 7 years, but I knew that if anybody was sober, it was definitely this guy. And I got on Facebook and I messaged him on Facebook, and he eventually got back to me, and I had no idea what to do with my life, but he was like, "Look, man, I'm at this conference right now, but I'm going to give you a call when I get out of here." So he and I returned home from the work trip, and he got back from that conference, and he called me one night and started asking me questions like, "Hey man, have you done this? Do you drink like this? Have you done this?" And I would just say yes, and I'm crying into the phone, and yes, I've done that, and I've done that, and I don't know what to do. And I was like, "Okay, man." He says, "Well, I've got some guys that they're going to come over to your house." And again, he lives in Colorado. He was in Denver when I was speaking to him. He called some members here, probably in Rocky Mount. They called some people in the Cary, Apex area, Raleigh. And Sunday night, these two guys showed up to my house. One was wearing a suit. He was a younger dude, just spoken at Valley. And another was an older guy. And they pulled me out of my house and spoke to me on my driveway for a little bit. And the only thing that I can really remember from that is just kind of looking down at their feet, looking at my feet, and just saying, "Guys, I appreciate you being here, but you just don't understand." And the way that it framed in my mind is what I said to him is that, "Guys, you don't understand. My wife is going to leave me if I continue to drink, and I know she's going to leave me if I stop drinking." And it wasn't until kind of years later, whenever I got to that point, or maybe what I never read in the book where it says, soon you won't be able to imagine life with or without alcohol. I mean, that sums it up completely. Like I could not imagine life anymore with or without alcohol. And those guys were like, "Okay, well, tell you what's going to happen. This guy, he's going to pick you up tomorrow night. You're going to go to a meeting with him, and we'll see what happens." And so that guy picked me up at like 4:30 or 5 o'clock for a 7 o'clock meeting, and we stood out in front of a church for like 2-3 hours, and I was pissed off, and I hated it, and I could not understand why has this guy got me here in front of a church for 3 hours? The meeting is not for another, it's pissed off. And I was terrified too, right? I mean, you've got all these people, you all look happy, I'm not happy, and you want to talk to me, and I definitely don't want to talk to you, and I'm terrified. And what I remember, and what I remember from nights after that, is I would follow around this guy to meetings, and he became my sponsor. And I'd follow this guy around to meetings, and I would watch him interact. And he would get to a meeting, and he'd go out and start shaking people's hands. Say, "Hey man, how you doing? Hey, it's good to see you." Yeah, and it's like he knew everybody. And I would look at that, and I'd just be like, "Man, how do you do that? There is no way that's ever going to happen for me. I've got nothing. I can't. There's no way I'm going to help anybody." But ultimately, what occurred is I asked him to be my sponsor. I got a home group, which is There Is a Solution. I've been there since I got sober. And I was immediately surrounded by people that believed absolutely in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous as a way of life. people that believe that it absolutely could not fail. That if you would just do some simple things, that you could have a better life. And so I would watch them, and these people, they would show up to meetings early, and they would set up chairs and make coffee, and then they would drag me out to go get some dinner, and then they'd call me up outside of meetings, and they'd ask me to go over to intergroup or to go over just to have some coffee, and they would just let me know. They let me see like how they lived their life day to day by applying principle to it, by being loving and tolerant, by being good people, by being of service wherever they could. And I would just watch them. And I remember moments like where we're at a homeless shelter and I'm with my sponsor, we just read, and the guys are getting up. It's like 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning at this point, and these guys are walking out. They've got to leave the homeless shelter for the day, and I'm terrified, right? That all those thoughts are running through my mind like, man, there's no way I could help these people. There's no way. They're going to ask me to do something, and I can't do anything. I've got to get home, and my wife's probably wondering where I am, and I can't, all this kind of stuff. And I remember my sponsor at that point, he looked at me, just like dead in the eye, but very calmly. He just looked at me, and he just said, all right, Marshall, we're done here. Now we're going to go see if we can't be of service. And it was just like a very simple thought, very simple action. And it was like when I heard that, it cut through all of that garbage that was running through my head and just let me know that, like, all right, it's just a very simple, we're just going to go here and we're going to do this. And he would read with me, and he'd get up and he'd meet me at his house. He'd have me come over there at 6 or whatever it was in the morning, and he'd read with me and took me through the book, and I'd have moments with him where we're going through the fourth step, and I'm getting into the fifth step, and I don't know how he does this. I don't know how this ever happened. But he looked me dead in the eye in the fifth step as I'm spewing some just garbage, just how woe is me, and my mom does this, and he just looks at me and he goes, do you have any idea how selfish you are? I was like, I'm sorry. But it was like it cut through all of that nonsense I was talking about. And all of a sudden, like, I just recognized, like, all of a sudden I had this clarity that I saw, like, oh man, I am selfish. Like, I am selfish and self-centered to the extreme. As it says in our literature, an extreme case of self-will run riot. And it put me kind of on this path to start to kind of deal with that. And then I'd go out to lunch with a guy, and I'm yelling at him, like, again, like, I hate all you, and I don't understand why God's doing this to me, and why he better stop helping me. Tell God to go help that guy. He probably needs it more than I do. And this guy is kind of saying all this stuff, like, look, I want you to take lipstick and write it on the mirror, like, I can't remember. There's a bunch of sayings you can say, but eventually what he said to me is he sounds like you're asking the wrong question. And I'm like yelling at him, and he says that, and I'm going, oh, what? He says, it sounds like you're asking the wrong question. Probably need to ask how instead of why. And so it started to open up my mind a little bit. I became willing to say, like, okay, if I'm not going to ask why are you helping me? Why am I here? What's the point of all this? All right, how? How can I be of service today? Like, I could again, I was angry at God. I could clearly see that something was happening in my life, and I hated him for it. But then I reframed the question just to say, like, okay, look, I see that something's going on. I see you're doing something for me. I know that I can never repay you. I know that's not the point. But if you just show me how I can just get started, I promise I'll do whatever you tell me to do. And it was moments like that ultimately led into me having my own experience, where I'm on a business trip and I'm in a dark funk in sobriety, a dark night of the soul for a number of years, and I'm at this Thai restaurant, and I'm like, I'm done. Like, I'm drinking, I'm tired of this. And I remember thinking to myself, like, all right, I'm getting a Zing, whatever, Tao beer, and this waiter's walking up to me, and I'm getting super excited, goosebumps and everything, and all of a sudden a quiet, calm voice comes over me and says, why don't you just wait a little bit? Like, that beer will always be there. Or I'm out to dinner, early dinner over on the West Coast with some colleagues that I used to work with, and they start talking about how good it was like a lemon drop shot or something sounds. Like, oh, wow, that sounds good. And I'm looking at it and I start thinking to myself, like, oh, yeah, it does sound pretty good. And all of a sudden my hair kind of stands up on my neck. It's like, oh no, like this is a bad spot to be in right now. But I can remember the times where I'm with, my sponsor and with people that I admire, and what they say is just, look, go to a meeting, pray, try to help somebody. Just very simple steps. And I remember these things, and a voice comes over me and it says, say the Serenity Prayer. So I said it a few times, and my neck, my hair kind of stood down a little bit, and then I was able just to enjoy life with them. Like that passed, and I was able just to be another human being with them and sharing life. I've since, I end on this. My sobriety is not perfect for me. It's ups and downs. I've got kids. It started off very intensely, picking up guys at the homeless shelter, and then a period of kind of fear. With kids, what am I going to do? How am I going to kind of continue this life? And what I found today is an enjoyment. I've always believed very heavily in what it says in our literature. It says very just point blank, and I'm probably paraphrasing all of this. There's more to put around it, but point blank, purpose in life is to be of maximum service to God and our fellows. And I believe very strongly that's what it means. Like, it's not just Alcoholics Anonymous, that I need to be of service everywhere. That my purpose is to show up in life, either at work or home or here, and just see how I can add to life, like it says. But I've found just a very strong connection and a very strong purpose in trying to serve and be with other alcoholics. I started going into the jail last year, and I love going in there. Like, sometimes it's scary going in there, and like you listen to a guy's fifth step and you're all alone with them, and it's just like, all right, like, where's the door? But I love being in there, because there is that sense of purpose that I feel when I'm there. And it's not that like I'm going to save the world or that I'm going to help anybody. I hope I do. I hope somebody gets something out of this. You identify with some peace. But what I know is that I've done the right thing. I've shown up. I've fulfilled my purpose. And that's the feeling that I get when I participate in Alcoholics Anonymous, and when I try to serve, is that, all right, I've showed up. I've done my deal. And it kind of coincides with that, just however I can be used, God. You just show me and I'll do it, and I promise I'll do the very best I can. So that's kind of where sobriety is today for me, is I try to just show up, and I try to just take action, not worry about a lot of activity, but just to stay focused in the moment, and try not to think about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow. So I appreciate being here. I always love coming down here. It's always good to see everybody here. I feel like this town, city, I don't know what you call it now, but this town gets prettier every time I come down. So I might have to move down here at some point. But anyway, I appreciate it, man.